to cut this out. I've got fucking rats running around. Like, it's gross. It's so disgusting. Every morning it's like, all right, how many kills last night? How many kills did I get? One of them was massive.
Totally different than rats, but we let the flies in because we got a salt gun. Yeah, when I like take a break or I'd go in the kitchen or something, I'll take like 5 minutes and just walk around with this salt gun. It's so fun.
That is so. The first time I saw them, I'm like, that is so American. It's so American. It's like, how should we manage these flies? I know, guns.
You know what's funny about that is I got it for my girlfriend for like Valentine's Day or something. She's not big on flowers and stuff. So, yeah, and you'd laugh, but she was fucking stoked. Like I nailed it with the with the salt gun.
Oh, there's a guy, a mate of mine. You're as bad as a friend of mine. He's like, oh, what'd you do? It was your anniversary. Like, what'd you do? He's like, oh yeah, me and my wife, we took my excavator out and we buried a dead horse for a friend. I'm like, nice. That's a nice date. That's exceptional. He's like, yeah, well, it had to happen. Like, I figured we'd just do it together as a couple. Like, just drive the excavator over and bury a horse.
That's hilarious.
Happy anniversary.
All right, welcome to the build. So it's moving quickly.
And their product velocity is intense. We're both pretty involved in the LangChain community.
This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode.
The hype cycle is like, just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
Need to go back, find out more because it was really interesting.
We're both obsessed with AI and their entire stack is just pivoted to agents.
The next question that usually comes after that is like, well, I'm fine-tuning an open model.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec.
It's an exploding distribution vector.
I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one.
The build.
All right, Cameron, welcome to the build. How are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you faring by yourself?
Yeah, good. I'm lamenting the loss of my cabin, so I've been using all of Google's new fandangled mapping tools to look for new cabins to buy, which I want to show you later in the episode. Should be pretty funny. But you've been just playing with Claude Code. I'm hopeful you'll be able to teach me all about this because it's taken over the internet.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So, you want to start? There, or
let's go through these Onslaught Chinese models. There's a few things that I saw this week. The big one is everything that we're about to talk about will be subsumed next week, apparently, by the release of GPT 5. Which is just going to blow any of these things out of the water, which is pretty funny. Although, interestingly, they still haven't released their OpenAI's open source model that they were touting, and they said that they were going to, and they're kind of getting destroyed by these Chinese research labs. On that open source topic, did you see any of the meta stuff going down this week?
I saw some headlines about super intelligence for everybody.
Yeah.
I assume something along those lines, right?
Yeah, so Zuck, I saw that announcement, but that sort of makes sense. But the interesting thing was basically it's like he's stepping away from open source, is what he said. So the leading open sourcing company in the West anyway is sort of stopping. And the Chinese are just dominating.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, he said that they're gonna.
That's massive, dude. Because they're like the only. I mean, you say like they're like one of the. All these models are built off of Llama, right? I mean,
yeah. And he specifically said that like one of the reasons why was just that it's probably helping our competitors. Like there was a lot of fluff around like it's about safety and stuff. But 2 years ago, the official statement that he released was like, open source is the only way. It's the only way to keep things safe and keep the industry, on an even keel. So that's kind of interesting. And that was off the back of some of these offers that were just reported were insane to these researchers. Like apparently there was one which was $1 billion over 4 years, and people were saying no. So I don't know what, like, no one actually knows. None of these people are making very big statements, but they obviously have a reason why they don't want to go and work at Meta, some of these people. So yeah, it's an unbelievable talent war. But yeah, did you see any of these Chinese models, the ones that got released this week, or they've been kicking off? While I pull up some of the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, I read the notes, and I haven't really played with them too much. Like Qwen 3, I'm actually a big user of the Qwen models in general. But I haven't done anything extensive or really in depth where like really anything that's productive. More just kind of like, same 3JS prompts we all throw in and stuff like that. So
yeah, I haven't like embedded them into my workflow, although I've been looking at a lot of people who've been using them on X, and there's a couple of pretty cool hacks that I want to talk you through. But we talked about Qwen 3 last week, Qwen 3 Coder. These are basically the growth in these models. This is on OpenRouter. You can see like what's effectively trending and coming up. And you can see the token count. So we talked about Qwen 3 Coder. Then Qwen also released a update to their thinking model, which was really cool. There's also this GLM-4.5 model, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about. And then the other model that I saw was it was this hierarchical reasoning model from a Singapore-based research lab. Now it's just research preview at this point, but I'll touch on it very briefly because it's an interesting idea. Basically, they talked about changing the model or the approach to building a reasoning model, and modeling it more effectively, building it more in tune with how the brain actually works. And it's this very complicated system that you can be kind of high level summary is basically like thinking fast and slow. Kind of you've got two elements of the model working in tandem. They claimed that they were able to get a very high score on the ARC-AGI 1 benchmark, which we've spoken about a fair bit, but it's not ARC-AGI 2. It's not as high on ARC-AGI 2, which you can see there, but ARC-AGI 1 from a model that's only 27 million parameters, which if it is reproducible is pretty incredible. But it's only applied to what they call like a sparse kind of learning environment task, where it's almost like a puzzle solving model, in that it can learn and reproduce, basically learn new tasks within that sort of very narrow band domain without actually having much pre-training and seeing those tasks previously. So if it turns out that this approach or this change in the way you could build these reasoning models works and is reproducible, then it has a pretty significant impact in the I think in the robotics domain, because you could actually embed like this 27 million parameters. It's like 27 meg. Like you can embed that in anything. Like all of us could have these, a smart arm in it, just over our sink that could clean literally any plate for us without smashing it, or fold any piece of clothing. It has that kind of potential, which I thought was interesting. But we'll see. We'll see.
And then I know we're talking about like was it Gemma 3N? So they have like there's all these different categories, right? So this would be more like the workhorse model, and then you have these smaller ones that we've talked about, right? That might be more specialized or limited in scope. Is that how you're thinking about it too, or?
Yeah, I think it would be a like basically the way they were describing it is it's not like a workhorse model. It has a very high performance ability, or that kind of approach has high performance ability against those kinds of visual reasoning tasks, without being able to sort of be your high level strategic thinker, like an O3 model, for example. But I would imagine these kinds of model innovations just get embedded into each other. Like the whole idea of into a product experience, like the whole idea of ChatGPT 5, from what I've heard, is basically you never have to make a choice. The model, like you give it a task, and the model just decides. It decides, the thinking token quotient, the kind of model architecture, kind of execution, all of it, and it's subtracted away. And I'm imagining all of these innovations eventually just go into one thing. It's like, you and I don't really, when you use a service, you don't, like Salesforce or whatever, you don't like say, and also store that in your your NoSQL store, as opposed to your like ClickHouse or SQL. Like you don't get to make that choice, right? As a user.
Which that's something that we're all yearning for, right? But I think that's going to be challenging, and I guess I would assume that it'll lead to some frustration, at least initially, while they're tuning things. Because if they're not showing you the model that it's using in the background, you're not going to see that it's using the wrong, like maybe it didn't actually select the best model, so you won't see that. You'll just be like, piece of crap, right? At least early on while they're working it out. And the reason I say that is because in Azure OpenAI, they have a model, trying to find what it's called, like it does that for the OpenAI models, where it auto selects between like 4.1 mini, and then using that, I can actually see what models it chooses to use, and sometimes it's not the right one. So that's my first thought, is like, I guess, is that true? It'll probably all be behind the scenes, where you won't know what's been
that's
selected,
sort
right?
of like, that's like high level, which is kind of like what you can do in LangChain, right? Or all these other ones that have like the model like sequencing, or like whatever it is. You can say, all right, use this model in this context, or use this in this node, whatever. What I was more meaning is like this is what has been reported, is that the model would kind of like an extension of what we've seen with, say, thinking like thinking quota, but in a more intelligent fashion. I'm imagining it'll all be embedded in the architecture of the model that says, hey, I give you a task, like, all right, I'll go to all of these, like, I'll bring it up for you, because this is a task I gave to Operator recently. Go to all of these locations where I may be able to buy a cabin in the forest in California. And I just gave it these, and find me the lat long. And then if you pass that into this new architecture of the model, it will attempt to execute it as best it can. And then if it can't, it will change and adapt its approach and its cognitive architecture based on the model types or the execution paths that it has available. So it's like almost like dialing up and dialing down the reasoning, dialing up, tool calling, whatever it is, just doing it automatically.
Yeah, which is like mixture of experts, or MOE type, at least, right?
Yeah, I think MOE is like that's a slightly different concept, because it's like the parameters of the model and how many of the parameters are activated, which basically is like a energy consumption impact. So like, how they will always say, this is a 500 billion parameter model with 32 billion parameters activated. And that's what they mean by mixture of experts architecture, and that you can activate the right parts of the neural network that relate to the question or the task that you've given it, without consuming and activating everything. That means it's really slow. Whereas this might be, all right, I give you like if you fast forward into the future, you're like, all right, I just have like one grok model that runs my Tesla and my robot in my house and my phone on X. And then when the robot gets a request but still knows who I am, it's routing into one of those visual reasoning kind of architectural cognitive models, as opposed to, say, when I'm on grok on X, and I'm like, all right, find me all of the people that Cameron's interacted with so I can send them funny messages about him, like slightly different. Just on this, I don't know if you've played with have you played with the operator platform tool very much, or you just been deep in
You're living in the past, man. It's called Agent.
sorry, not operator.
That was
yeah,
last month. That was last month.
Last month. Sorry, my bad. Agent. Have you played with the agent much?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
It's still taking. I'm still adjusting to like remember. There are so many things I do where I'm like, oh yeah, I should just use the OpenAI agent. It works great. It's actually a great product.
It's actually a really good product. Like, I feel like we didn't give it enough cred, just because it was, I guess, also very simply described. It's just text search, like deep research plus operator combined together, but actually a very simple combination. It's super powerful and very effective. So yeah, like this is an example of what I was looking for, and this failed in
on computer use.
Computer use, yeah.
I think
this failed in every
computer
other
use is kind of like the
like I tried this in Google, like in Gemini. I tried it in a bunch of stuff, and it was like an operator just nailed this, which is like find me specific locations in Californian state forests based on a description, like Barrett Canyon and the forest where it might be, and return the actual lat long and the evidence that you have. And it was spinning up.
You're
like
telling me that Google couldn't find the coordinates? Just
Google failed on this primarily
on
because
Earth?
it was trying to
Anywhere?
I think the way it failed is it was trying to return these as locations, but these as locations, like, so there's a bunch in here. It gets some of them, but there's a bunch in here that also are very close to, in a similarity search, close to an actual town in California. So it was returning me like towns. It was almost like defaulting to its Google Maps kind of search without any more reasoning. Whereas, yeah, it really nailed this, and it nailed it over a lot of individual ones. So yeah, now I have to go through there and use Google to find cabins I want to buy. But digress. Let's talk about GLM 4.5. So this model was pretty cool, and it's been causing a bit of a stir. I think I might just pull up some of the performance data on this. I think this is probably the most impressive one out of everything that got released. Did you check out any of the performance benchmarks of this? Here we go. RuCode did some pretty good benchmarking of this. So had you heard of these guys before, this ZAI Research Lab?
Nope.
Neither had I. They've released a couple of models already, but I had never heard of them. But this one is the most interesting in that there's this large model, GLM 4.5, with that total activated parameters at 32 billion. But then they've also got this GLM 4.5 Air, which apparently you can just get running on your CPU. The guys on X we can share it in the show notes, have been showing off like just getting it running on your machine. It's like GPT 4.5 equivalent kind of performance that's running just locally, which is pretty rad. But one of the main things that I thought was pretty cool about this is overall performance, and this is a very marketing this kind of overview is pretty marketing specific, and so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But overall performance is very high for an open source model up against Grok 4 and 03. And this is the one that I thought was the most impressive, in that agentic performance is really, really high. So agentic tasks, and then they go in through the details of all of the different tasks that they pushed it against or that did it against. And it outperforms the majority of other models on browser use as well. So that's this benchmark here. So successful execution against this browser comp benchmark. which is really amazing. So I think
Yeah,
a lot of the
not to get sidetrack here, but that browse comp, have you looked at that and used any of that data for testing? Because I think that's actually a really great data set. And there are a lot of things in there similar to your latitude longitude problem, where on the surface you're like, this doesn't seem that hard. And then you plug it into to compare, and it's actually pretty amazing. So I think this is a great data set for, well, of course, for testing browser use and stuff. Deep research
so
as well.
so OpenAI built this eval set, right, as a benchmark. So here's an example. Please identify the fictional character who occasionally breaks the fourth wall with the audience, has a backstory involving help from selfless aesthetics, and is known for his humor, and had a TV show that aired between 1960s, 1980s, and had fewer than 50 episodes. What a question. So it's basically a data set of very, very vague search terms. This is like the most annoying.
And of like really obscure references and stuff. You know, like that Plastic Man. Like, of course, it's the first example. Yeah, it's like super obscure. And once you actually go through the research and what it really is, it's like, yeah, that took 100 steps to figure that out. So no one.
So it's basically a list of questions that I would ask when I'm at a dinner party and I've had a bottle of wine. It's like, yeah, I'm thinking of that book, you know. It's by that guy with the hair, and he had the moustache, and he wrote those 2 books back in the 80s. He wrote the 2 books. Fuck, you're annoying.
Yeah, Flat Stanley, right?
Yeah, right. That's really cool. The other benchmark. So this I wanted to show is the RuCode benchmarking that they did here. Cost versus, so they benchmark these based on coding potential, right, or coding ability. And ZAI is basically down here, so it's underperforming. This is a more independent, I guess. It's like mid-level costs are like $25. I'm assuming that's per million tokens. Or $27, sorry. Roughly $27 per million tokens, a score of 86 out of 100, outperformed by Gemini 2.5 at around the 90 mark. Claude's still up there. Claude still dominates, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, did you see any of the brouhaha about Claude changing their pricing? Or sorry, quota caps on Claude Max subscriptions?
Yeah, of course I did, and of course I noticed. Or did they actually start enforcing that? Because I started hitting limits.
I assume they have.
Just using it more.
Yeah,
I thought it was immediate.
I find it hilarious that people, like some developers on X, are just like, this is crazy and outrageous that Anthropic would do this, and then they showed examples of just some developers just like leaving it running 24/7, just going absolutely mental, as if like these things don't cost anything. Like, this is why we can't have nice things, guys. That's what someone said. It's like, someone's just gonna, tragedy of the commons, someone's just gonna go and do that, and then like they're like, yeah, of course, like I can't give you all this shit for free, guys, forever. Like,
yeah.
But
I'll admit, ever since I got the Max plan, I've used it more and more for things that I really don't need to. And I'm aware of that too, where I'm like, don't overdo it, but it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I don't know. Like once you have that ability, you're naturally going to use it more for really random, unnecessary things. And it just kind of goes back to the whole idea of even the release of LLMs kind of started triggering people to get sidetracked from just regular automation. And, I need an LLM for this well, not always. You could have done this. And I feel the same way with, now that I have pretty much unlimited use, I'm kind of naturally falling into that trap at times. So I totally understand how it's, I don't know what, I'm sure they expected that. It's just, it's the race. They almost have to. And the key thing that's, I don't know, kind of concerning or I don't like to hear is, did you hear when Dario was talking about, he might have tweeted, they didn't want to take investment from Saudis. I think it was Saudis. And basically said, like, I didn't want to do this, but we had no choice. We have to keep up. And like, that's the type of stuff I don't like hearing when people are kind of out in the open saying, hey, we're going against our intuition because we have to.
What I didn't see that. I know that they're raising capital at, it was reported like 160, 170 billion dollar valuation with another 2 to 3 billion put in. I didn't see that they are taking money from the Saudis, but I don't know why he would be particularly squeamish about that, given how embedded a lot of the just basically given how much capital flows from that part of the world into various American businesses, not just tech companies.
Yeah.
But also, why would they need to take outside capital that's not from one of their primary shareholders? Their primary shareholder is Amazon. It's not like Amazon's strapped for cash. But does that mean that they're falling behind? If you got to go, like, it's always a flag, like when a company is raising capital and their primary plank shareholder isn't pouring money in and they have lots of money already.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's where, Tom, I was hoping you knew about this so you could tell me more. And hopefully I'm not just repeating like fake headlines.
That's okay. I think it's a bit naive not to take money from like the economic transformation going on in the Middle East, driven by Saudi Arabia, is pretty compelling. I think it's a bit naive not to participate in that. But on the other hand, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's my opinion anyway. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, take a look at. Yeah, and I maybe it was too specific. I don't think it's Saudis specifically. It's just UAE. It's at least what I'm reading here.
The UAE, but even still,
whatever the case is, it sounds like he had to have some type of internal like battle over that, and I just don't like hearing that. Like, hey, this is our entire mission, our goal. This is we act on, the core of our business is doing what we believe is right. And when you hear a guy like that say, I don't really think this is right, but we have to, like, I don't like hearing it.
Actually, I have wondered about that recently and I've heard a few people talk about like the culture of these big tech companies, right, that are all American, building these AI models. And now the Chinese labs are really kind of pushing in the open source space, but they are still behind. Like they are still behind, and their models that they're releasing are behind the Frontier Labs public models, and we know that the Frontier Labs are constantly training their new models ahead of time, right? So plus there's the chip restrictions that do or should be constraining some of these labs, right? But it basically just means that there's an export function of culture embedded within these models between the United States and effectively China. What I was listening to and thinking about the other days from a couple of different people is like how countries might want to think about their own AI models and architectures and like have a bit more control over the embedded culture of how these things behave.
It's a dangerous line, right?
Yeah, well, is it? I don't know. Like it's Mistral, like, the open source French startup Mistral I think they're pushing pretty hard into this space because they realized that they were lacking behind. So they've, like the Frontier Lab, so they've pushed into, say, models that are very good at multilingual, that cover languages that are not necessarily covered extensively by the other models, and trying to enable some of these countries to have their own kind of AI infrastructure that is a bit more aligned with them. It's kind of like, you know, a nation state. A nation state is allowed to define its currency, right? It's kind of like that. And I'm surprised that there isn't more of a push to enable countries to have their own expressions of these large frontier models from the core labs. I'm surprised, but maybe I'm naive.
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense in terms of just like countries competing with each other, or even like military technologies, stuff like that. But in terms of like having influence over what the masses, and like, that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. That's my opinion. I don't want that. I don't want them involved anywhere in the developing anything that I use.
That was very libertarian of you. I
yeah, I guess I'm like full giveaway here. Very
yeah. The only other thing I wanted to highlight on these open source models is this Qwen 3. Man, they got to sort out these names, but it's basically an update to Qwen 3 that had like thinking and reasoning embedded within it. And I'll have to search for it. Basically, it outperformed a bunch of the key models on creative writing, which I'll pull up the reference. I won't be able to pull it up here, but I'll pull it up and chuck it in the show notes. But the hilarious thing about that is, like, these Chinese labs have no qualms about just training on anything and everything that they can get their hands on, right? So it's been reported that they just go to LibGen and just get every single document that's been out there on the internet for the history of time, whereas Anthropic's still embroiled in a copyright, lawsuit, even though they got out of one component of one of them that was in the courts. And they're saying that they have to purchase these things, whereas it comes up in some of these benchmarks where some of these open source Chinese models are just excellent. Like DeepSeek was just excellent at creative writing. I also don't know if maybe some of the tokens that they're trained on is multilingual, so it just gives it a bit more of an interesting kind of cognitive perspective on some writing tasks that maybe isn't embedded in some of the Western models. But I just found that very funny as well and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's still along the lines of, hey, we don't think this is how it should work, but we have no choice. Like, it's all driven by China doesn't enforce those rules. So then does everybody just throw their hands up and say like, oh, well, we just have to keep up, so it doesn't matter? I mean, it's such a very complicated, and it's just unfortunate to make those decisions, I think.
We haven't really talked about that, but what's your opinion on training versus training on copyrighted data versus regurgitating, right? Because as we saw when we covered the system prompt for Anthropic, they have a very specific directive in their system prompt around copyrighted or like phrasing that might be regurgitated by the model, and trying to put guardrails over the top of that. Like, they're pretty sensitive to that specific thing. But the bigger question is it a copyright breach if you train on data? Should the people who create that data be compensated? What do you think?
Right. I don't know, honestly, because there's so many ways to look at it, and it's in some ways kind of abstract, right? Like, if you think of, well, hey, I went to school and I don't pay per use for the information that I learn and consume. I don't know. Like, I don't know the answer, but so I'm not throwing shade at anybody. I'm just saying it's unfortunate. I think there'll be a lot of decisions made with coming from that space of, well, this is just how it has to be, because we don't have any better ideas. somebody in the, like, I don't know, music licensing. Seems like maybe some type of licensing might make sense. I don't know. What have you thought about it? What do you think?
Yeah, a little bit. I've thought about it a bit, but I think it changes depending on the medium, like the creative medium, the impact and the kind of discussion. But copyright law and not talk about the law. Like the whole idea of copyright is you're able to retain some degree of ownership over some sort of creative work. Now that has questions around it anyway, around like, well, how much do you really own of a creative thought? How original is something? Like how like, because of the nature of the embedded learning process and the generative kind of creative process of anything that any human does is built on this basis of learning. And these AI models basically are a computational kind of execution of that. That's like a neural network, right? So that's the first question I have is like, well, how much can you really own, right? Given that all of your output is generally a summation of everything that came before you.
Yeah, if you're talking about music, like me as a musician, or like if I sit down and start playing my guitar, I come up with a riff. It like, yeah, it came off the top of my head, but it wouldn't have come out at all if I hadn't heard like all my influences, right? And like music is just an easy example, at least for me. But that's kind of that applies to everything, right? It's like we just took influences or ideas or components of other things and remixed it, right? So at what point do you consider something original? And I guess that's where the lawyers come in and they have the answers to that. But I don't know.
It's also a function of like, these things are only a problem when the technology changes, right? So these things come up and cause a stir when the ability to replicate things gets easier, right? So like from the printing press, which caused a problem for the church because people could then print their own ideas and share them around.
Right.
And then the Protestants were like, I don't really like the Catholics very much. Let's do something about that. But all the way up to like books being replicated and that being an issue, to then say DVDs, to then Napster, to like every single wave. I think the primary thing that's different this time is that copyright holders or participated in the internet because the value bled to the edges. And this is what Read Write Own book by Chris Dixon is really good on this topic. Actually, it's like the internet was a an enabling technology because it was able to distribute value out to the edges. Now, it didn't do it perfectly, and there was still concentration, but at least you could put something up as a creative output on a website, and then you would get traffic and you could monetize that in some way. This changes the dynamic of that because all of that knowledge that's been contributed is then embedded into these models to an extent. And Google, for example, can just create new advertising inventory by spurting out new responses in AI mode and sell ads on that without any kind of passback. And I don't know if you've used AI mode. They are going to absolutely dominate the answer advertising space. Like, I think Google is just going to, because like they're just going to get even more profitable and make even more money if that's even possible to imagine, because they now just have all of the answers and the responses embedded into an environment where they can just sell ads and they don't necessarily have to push traffic out. That's the primary problem. So, but I don't think the copyright argument is the right way to approach that, solving that problem, because the cat's out of the bag. It's kind of like saying, it was kind of like saying, which some people did say, they're just like, oh, you just have to stop torrenting stuff back when torrenting was a thing. That wasn't the answer. The answer was streaming, right? Just let me buy access to all of the music that's ever been created on a subscription amount and I'll pay for it. There's got to be some version of that. that's an exchange. I just don't know what something like
yeah,
that
which
will come along.
like that example was great. Your Spotify example was great for us, the consumer. Absolutely shitty for the artist, though, right? Like,
I wonder about that. I've heard that argument before, but I don't exactly know. I think the old school, like the music industry, had a lot more mid-tier people who were publishing music who were able to get an income. But I still think the concentration rate was very high in the industry. And then after streaming, I think it's probably eaten out some of the middle, but the concentration is still probably there.
yeah, there's a spectrum. If you're Beyonce, it's fine, right? If you're like a indie band, terrible. And yeah, there are different perspectives on that, but
But I think it's always I think the creative arts have always been like that. I don't know if there's ever been a democratized time when people could create, because you and I have both done music stuff. I spent a fair bit of my life trying to be a musician. I think the creative arts has always been a winner take all game. On the economic outcome. There are always people at the top who just basically manage to either eke out a living. So some of my friends are opera singers, for example, and they're not millionaires, but they're some of the best opera singers in the world. And they have a life, but they're still middle class, but they're in the top 0.1% of anyone who's ever tried to be an opera singer. And I kind of feel like the creative arts has always been like that, from having patrons to now you've got Patreon, right? Anyway, I digress. I pulled up this creative writing benchmark. Maybe the difference will be the AI models will be better than us, better than the top 0.1% in the future. But they're definitely better than me at creative writing now. So this is that creative writing benchmark I was talking about. You can see some of these Chinese models. So this is the GLM-4.5 model that came out this week. But Kimi is actually at the top, another Chinese model, right? Or research model. When I say Chinese, I say Asia, because some of these are actually based in Singapore, and this is only one of the creative writing benchmarks, but I find that curious.
I will spend a lot of time looking at creative writing benchmarks, and it almost seems counterintuitive. I don't know. How do you benchmark?
Well, yeah, it's like writing quality. I guess, yeah. It's like writing quality. I look at it a fair bit, obviously, because I'm Hemingway. Sorry, not Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway app. This is a good example. I look at it a fair bit because of my exposure to the marketing side of things. But if you this is a great app to show it off, where you can basically see this one came out years ago. It's called the Hemingway app, and basically it's just writing optimization based on reading comprehension, sentence structure, all the sort of basics, grammar, all those sorts of things. It's taking me back to my journalism kind of training and stuff, but it's this kind of thing, right? So it's not necessarily creative writing, come up with a story. It's well, what's the quality of the prose? What's the comprehension rate? How well does it sort of take the user through the creative concept, or through the concept as a piece of writing? I don't think anything that Kimi or O3 is ever going to win a Booker Prize, but it will replace, based on all of these things, you can see it replacing every other piece of, as it already has, every other piece of corporate writing that anyone's ever going to do. I think that's why these benchmarks sometimes matter more. But interestingly, O3 is still up there on at least this one benchmark. All right, moving on, because I want to get into Claude Code soon. I have one other thing I want to talk to you about in the notes, but did you have anything else in the news? Did you have anything else before I take you through this AlphaEarth thing?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember, at least.
That's all right. I'm sure, well, there'll be a lot coming down the pipe. Oh, actually, before I go into AlphaEarth, LangChain also released a deep agents new function that I haven't played with yet, but I will. I'd like to do a demo of this maybe next week. It's basically a benchmark kind of agent architecture. You can see it here. that's sort of then basically built into like a helper function and a bunch of other component parts that they've updated in the core. I think it's in the core of LangGraph. That looks pretty cool. That came out yesterday, so I want to play with that this week, and maybe we could go and do a few demos of it next week. Nice to see the LangChain guys are still pushing stuff out.
So it's it's like their open source version of SubAgents, Claude Code.
I think so, yeah. I think it's basically they referenced how the Claude Code architecture and how that works. And then they basically said, well, here's how you can execute a version of that using LangGraph and LangChain. So it would be cool to play with.
I'm excited to check that out, particularly with,
yeah,
like LangChain supports a llama and like local model use. So I would assume that will be supported here. And as I'm experimenting with Claude Code SubAgents, that's been top of mind. Like, we've talked about the smaller local models. They have a very specific purpose. You can use them in really special ways, but they're not going to be the workhorse. And that's one of the things I've been thinking. So hopefully this will enable that.
Well, we'll put this in the show notes. I didn't send it to you because I think I found it last night on X.
Yeah.
But this is Harrison's. Harrison's just got this example on his it's just on his personal GitHub. It's not even on the original ones, on the LangChain one. So it must be pretty fresh. But this is an example. So he's got a little custom agent you can just fork here. So yeah, maybe that's the homework. Go and fork this and give it a crack.
Yeah,
so
man,
that's cool.
That's
I just wanted
awesome.
to mention that.
I'm excited.
Then the other thing, so as you know, I work in real estate and sort of finance and all that environment. And this announcement from Google sort of caught my eye. But also it caught my eye because I've been thinking about like, well, how do we think about how the built environment as well as sort of understanding and tracking the built environment over time will change using AI tools. And Google released AlphaEarth into their Earth Engine Google Cloud kind of toolkit. The companies that primarily use this Earth Engine, or all of the mapping tools through Google Cloud they're like autonomous driving, or they're kind of like rideshare, urban planning, all of those kinds of companies that need to use really detailed high data throughput mapping functionality. But this is pretty interesting in that it's primarily targeted at research institutions or companies or agriculture or anyone who's trying to understand the Earth from a larger kind of context, like how do these systems interact? But what they did is they basically created a super embedding model of the world. So they've embedded an understanding of the entire world into a model called AlphaEarth. It has all of the different kind of data sets that the Google Earth engine, I don't know if you played with Google Earth recently, but it's still kind of up and running. Remember, everyone blew everyone's minds back in like 2010. But it's still moving, and it's actually gotten even better. They have all these data sets embedded within Google Earth. I've got some of them up here actually, which I can just show off, like climate and weather kind of data sets, surface temperature, atmospheric data, all captured from satellites and all these data providers over many years. They've got imagery data sets. They've got specific agricultural data sets, all sorts of stuff. Land cover. They've got LiDAR details. They've got the terrain. They've got all sorts of, the basic. And basically what they've tried to do is aggregate every single one of those data sets up into a 10 meter by 10 meter chunk of the Earth's surface with many different layers of all of those data sets embedded into one hyper globe model that could be used by big learning and by big data and machine learning researchers and app developers to try and build apps that understand weather and climate more effectively, to understand, the changing nature of the Earth's surface, the changing dynamics around urban environments, all of those things using every single data set embedded into one model. Like, don't you think that's crazy?
Hey, sure. You're breaking out. I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't hear I
Okay.
didn't hear anything you said. Let's try it.
Very good.
Yes,
That's
I
very good.
totally agree, Tom. Yeah. Whatever you said.
Whatever you said was amazing. Oh, that's very, very funny.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, I'll have to think about that.
Well, I'm glad you're in agreement. I'm glad you're in 100% agreement with me that this is one of the most compelling things you've seen recently. I think,
Yeah, from what I
DeepMind
saw,
guys,
though, you were saying that you said something about a 10 by 10, almost think of it like chunking, like how we think of text, like each point in the embedding model is like a 10 by 10 chunk of Earth.
yes.
Trying to think of it.
That's what they're basically saying is so the model, like this AlphaEarth model, combines all of these different data sets, and all they're trying to do is basically create like a hyper embedding model for a 10 by 10 meter square of Earth, of the Earth's surface. So everything 10 meters by 10 meters, which is it's hardly anything. Every single 10 meter by 10 meter square across the globe has this embedding chunk in the AlphaEarth model that combines all of the different data sets that they've captured over time, including imagery, LiDAR data, surface coverage in terms of foliage data, water movement, changes in the surface coverage like ice coverage or water coverage or whatever, all into one embedding model of the world. It also includes a bunch of temperature data, a bunch of weather data as well. The impact of having something like this, and they've already made some impacts in terms of some weather models, but the whole idea is they want to basically create a basis for researchers to better understand the globe and how the systems that impact our daily lives work more effectively. So you could better predict, say, weather, not just within a couple of weeks or a month, and then have an understanding of long trend. But I could say El Nino will come back in, will flip over at this exact time, and the volume of rainfall in that year will be exactly this, or this is the nature of the pace of change of the climate based on these factors, and it will impact these parts of the globe in this specific way, rather than just saying, well, raising temperatures will change the dynamic of weather patterns, but we don't, other than generally saying that there will be more hurricanes, we don't exactly know where they're going to be. We don't exactly know which parts are going to get drier or some parts may get wetter. All of those variables. The idea is to try and understand the globe more effectively, like the world more effectively across all those different systems. So it's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing, and of course that has big implications for science community and weather and stuff like that. But first thing that comes to mind is farming. Of course, we don't have as many independent farmers as we used to, but if you're a farmer, that's your life. Trying to understand weather patterns and plan appropriately. What do you?
My dad was a farmer. I grew up in a farming
community. I'm just thinking about my family. I come from a.
Yeah. Understanding those things
so
is
this accessible.
He would always say it's like getting
if you're
into bed
farmer,
with Sorry, you go. I'll cut that bit out. Pause. I'll cut it. You go.
Yeah, we must have a delay because we're talking over each other, and I've noticed both of us don't notice until 5 seconds later. I think there's a delay here. You go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so my dad was a farmer and I worked in the wine industry for a while as well. And it would be like, despite what they can do now, which is pretty compelling, you're still in bed like with Mother Nature as your primary business partner, and it's just terrifying, right? It's really, really hard. And I think people who work with bits every day, like you and I, it's hard to appreciate what that really means. And so initiatives like this, have a downstream impact directly on, say, the food supply and our ability to support billions of people around the world. So it's not like it's not significant, these kinds of initiatives. And a lot of the data sets I'm going through here, like these are all the different data sets. There's so many they've got in this platform that they've aggregated up into this model. Many of them are like ground cover agricultural kind of studies. There's been so many done over many years, say satellite kind of mapping and visual, like aerial photography, satellite photography related to agricultural coverage. There's like very, very fine grained, high quality, high res imagery around certain locations for agriculture within this data set as well. Not to mention like forest cover, forestry kind of data sets as well.
I didn't catch how accessible is this technology? Like, if you are a farmer or something like that, can you use this?
That's a great question. So I've spun it up. This is in Google Cloud. I wanted to understand that. So in Google Cloud, you can go to their recent, where is it? Everything in Google Cloud gets lost. There's so many products in here. And I spun up a mapping project.
Hey, they're all about the same.
You can get access to
but
it.
I will say at least.
Yeah, you can get access to it for free if you are a researcher, or as an individual, you can just use it as on demand. But if you have a high throughput, it's about $500 a month, and I'm just going to have to search for it. There's Google Earth, and then there's Earth Engine. Earth Engine. Here we go. Earth Engine, planetary scale platform for Earth science. Interestingly, I found like some of the imagery data sets in here are not as good as just using Google Earth. But this is it here. And then they have a code editor where you can just execute, but then you can open in Colab notebooks as well. And then the API, you can pull on all these different things. And then I was using the code editor just to mess around and try out a few of these different data sets to try and see what it's like and how easy it is to use. It's a little bit slow moving. So if I pull up some examples here, where's my examples? Yeah, here's an example of how it actually works. And they've got basically an execution environment where you can test out different scripts and see and pull data sets across all of their data packages. So this isn't the AI model that I was describing. The AI model is that AlphaEarth model is like more of a researcher toolkit. You'd need some serious kind of machine learning chops to use that. But for example, you can play around with this and say, all right, I want to look at a certain location across different data sets like this human modification data set. If I click on this one, that looks pretty cool. Or the annual crop inventory data set from 2009 for Canada. There's so many different models in here. And then they have execution scripts here based on a lat long that you can just copy and paste in there. So I should be able to use this. In here, you can just try it out and then run it. No, not that one.
Yeah, so you can at least somewhat get your hands on it today, and then in the future, I assume it'll be more widespread. But yeah, dude, that's awesome. And this is the type of technology that it doesn't necessarily make me run to my computer like, oh, I got to get my hands on this right now. But it's the type of thing that's, I would say, like, without a doubt, good for humanity, right? I mean, you could use this nefariously as well, but overall, like this seems like such a benefit, a great thing for everybody.
Yeah, the fact that it's broadly available and effectively free, particularly for researchers, is amazing. Yeah, so that's an example of a specific data set visualization. You can just plug it in. And then these are very simple scripts, like JavaScript kind of script execution environment here for this mapping thing, where you can look at all of the different assets, so data sets, and then basically run them in here like a playground. It's definitely not consumer friendly, but the intent of this is more to be an API kind of dev product or connected up to BigQuery if you're using some of those machine learning tools, like to try and do more complex analysis.
Yeah. This is not an application. It's the engine behind that you build your applications on, right?
Yeah. I listened to some of the Dennis, is it Habas? Oh, I always mispronounce his last name, who's the head of DeepMind. He won the Nobel Prize, right? And he was just talking about all the different initiatives, and they have these AlphaEarth, Alpha, and they always call it Alpha, like AlphaGo, AlphaZero, AlphaFold. And it seems like the whole idea or the very high level concept is if something is described in nature, then it has systems that can be understood. And then AI models, therefore, should be able to understand and replicate those systems. And each one of these is an execution of that. So this is an initiative to attempt to understand the world's systems at a global scale using modern AI, which is an incredible idea.
Yeah. Well, I watched something of his recently, and he put a specific focus on like Turing machines. And I'm not the expert necessarily to break it down scientifically. But what I took from it was like, he was kind of saying how we can solve so many of these specific problems with like the same technology that's been around for a long time, right?
All right, let's get into Claude, because I want to see what all the brouhaha is about.
Have you done anything with the SubAgents, or just so I have an idea?
No, I'm completely in your hands, and I was just gonna let you run the show, and I might ask you some questions. I did find a few like packages of app built on top of it, like that Claude Flow. But I really kind of just want to understand, because you said it's sort of like changes the way that you think about working. Yeah, we can go for as long as you want, but
Yeah,
I kind of just want to understand like what you think of it and why it matters.
Yeah, I think I'll just pull up the knowledge base article or documentation and just kind of hit high level on like the features and why I think it's important. And then, yeah, feel free to just jump in, ask questions, and then I can show some examples and some of the ideas that I've been messing with.